this crew will accomplish for the glory of the Soviet Union.
What, you really believe that Brezhnev is going to care about your beautiful mission?
This show has been building towards something since we found out Valya worked for the Americans a few episodes ago. And this week, the payoff, or maybe the shocking payback for his actions, are played out. I've said this before, but this show makes its characters make tough decisions, and this week's ending really reflects that. How far would you go to stop a national hero who's an American spy? Well, we get a pretty clear and definitive answer, and as always, I don't think anyone's seen it coming. We get more shocking twists and turns, with the deception just getting more layered as the story goes on. So if you haven't seen it, I am going to be talking about Season 1, Episode 6 of Star City. But first of all, as always, I'm Al, this is the Geek in Review. If you haven't done it already, subscribe to the channel, because shockingly about 90% of you who watch these videos haven't, and if you make it all the way to the end, leave a like as well. So this week opens with Irina going to meet Tanya in Moscow, and she's already fled after seeing the photo of a young Irina and Brezhnev, the leader of the Soviet state. So what exactly is the connection here between these two? Is Irina his daughter? Is she the father of his child? Well, we don't really get any clear answers in this episode, and I think they're going to save that for next week. But whatever the connection is, I think it is going to play a bigger role in the story, and I'm going to get to that at the end of the video. Anyway, Tanya manages to go to a nearby cafe and leaves 2 marks on a wall. Now you might be wondering straight away why she done this, and if you remember last week's episode when she confronted Valya, he did tell her that the Americans could get her out, and this is pretty much the instructions that he was given.
There's a woman in Moscow. She said to me, if anything goes wrong, I go down to I put 2 marks on the cafe, on the wall.
So this is the signal that Valya was supposed to give in order to get himself out the country if things went south, and Tanya is now reaching out to the Americans hoping that they can save her. And I didn't really see this coming. So far the show has been pretty sparse with references to what's going on in the States, and when you think about it, mainly that's because most of these characters wouldn't know, as information is that tightly controlled. We also see how information is controlled in this episode in the way that they use Lakshmi's husband to communicate to her, and I'll get to that in a minute. But I doubt even the Colonel has a clear picture of what's going on outside the Soviet Union at this point. But when Irina does show up to the flat where she's supposed to meet Tanya, she is genuinely shocked. Like, it never occurred to her that Tanya would see this photo and how it would affect her. So whatever is going on, she definitely doesn't want people knowing about whatever her connection is to the most powerful man in Russia. And I think maybe that's one of the reasons that she's after Tanya. I also think Irina might have some sort of romantic connection to Tanya, but it doesn't really play out this week. Back at Star City, the Colonel and her men are turning over Valya and Tanya's lives as they find the fake travel papers Irina provided for her. The Colonel assumes that someone else is on the inside working for the Americans, so security is no doubt going to get even tighter after they've discovered that one of their star cosmonauts was working for the Yanks. Irina goes back to Star City as the Colonel wants to know if she heard anything while listening to the couple over all this time. And the Colonel thinks that Valya and Tanya are in on this together, and Irina is shocked to discover that Tanya warned Valya that all this was coming. Remember as well that the Colonel doesn't know at this point that Valya's not on Earth anymore, so she just assumes that they're on the run together. As Irina leaves, the Colonel gets informed that there's been an unauthorised launch at Baikonur, so the clock is now ticking on the chief designer's plans coming out as well. The crew are now well on their way to Venus, and Valya only has time to think about his actions. And Sasha clearly knows that something's up with his friend here, because they're going to have to spend 9 months together, so it's only a matter of time before it all comes out, if they even make it to Venus. The chief designer checks in with him, and he's running the mission from a side office off of the main mission control, so he's not ready to be exposed yet. But that pretty much happens straight away when the Colonel comes to visit investigating the unauthorised launch, and he tells her all about the mission to Venus and his super secret plan. Now, the Colonel points out the same thing that I did, that Venus isn't habitable and there's no real point to this, but the chief designer tells her they aren't going to land on the planet's surface, but doesn't give any more information before these two get into it. And this episode is a whole back and forth mostly between these two characters. But she has to toe the party line at the moment, and that's a moon base, not more exploration of our solar system. So when she finds out that Valya's on the crew, she evacuates mission control and tells the chief designer about what Valya's been up to working for the Americans. And we really get an in-depth point of view on how Valya was recruited and why he was working for the Americans later on. Her, but given the fact that the chief designer has been secretly taking funds, parts and everything else to arrange this, the Colonel thinks that she has him cornered, but he's convinced one of the higher-ups finding out about what they've achieved once they reach Venus will all be forgiven in the name of Soviet glory, and the Colonel does name-check Brezhnev here as well. So is he going to be making an appearance? Personally, I highly doubt it, as in for all mankind up until the last season, we'll only ever really see presidents in sort of news clips and audio clips. They weren't actually a main character in the show, and even in the last season of For All Mankind we only seen video clips of the president. He wasn't actually a part, and we never actually seen his point of view throughout season 5. But the news of Valya being a spy really rocks the chief designer's world, as he thought he knew this man who's now helping to run his super secret mission to Venus. And it actually seems to affect his health as well at one point. Now, as I've said since episode 1, it's spies on watchers on watchers. Last week we got introduced to a hotshot new lieutenant who's basically vying to take the Colonel's place, and we kind of see that start to play out this week as well. His department is taking over the hunt in the search for Valya and Tanya, and what's interesting is the Colonel hasn't exposed the chief designer's plans yet, and doesn't tell this guy that Valya isn't on Earth. So she's trying to cover her own back as well as the chief designer's back, so she's certainly keeping options open. If it does get out that Valya is, for a better word, ungettable, it's not going to be good news for her, and that pretty much sums up how this episode ends, but I'll get to that in a minute. Going back to her job, trying to act normal, Irina does as she's told and listens to the previous recordings of the couple to try and find out and try and help the Colonel locate them. She's interrupted by this new lieutenant just as she's listening to the part of the tape where Tanya talks about their trip to Moscow, and we find out that this guy has a bit of a passing familiarity with Irina. Basically, he shares a cousin who went to school with her. He tells Irina that his team is now leading the manhunt for Valya, but what's interesting is he treats her like everyone else, so he doesn't even know who she's connected to either. I mean, he's a bit more friendlier with her, but he doesn't show any sort of signs of respect or fear of her. She later walks in as they're planning the search for them, and Irina does take some files with her to help locate the American agent that recruited Valya all those years ago before she leaves the room. So she's trying to find this woman in order to find Tanya. Back in Moscow, Tanya does go to the designated meeting point Valya told her about and does meet the American woman who recruited them at the start of the last episode. Remember, this woman has been watching Tanya for years, exactly like Irina, so this woman is in fact the American mirror of Irina when you think about it. And we do get quite a detailed explanation on how and why Valya was recruited as well, and it's not for the reasons that you think. Irina does go on the hunt in Moscow looking for the American agent, and we've never really seen this side of her before. She's determined and forceful and resourceful, and yet she's much more like her older version of herself that we're familiar with from For All Mankind. She does manage to locate the American agent and follows her in hopes of locating Tanya as well. But the woman gives her a slip not before Irina plants a bug on her, so she can still track her down and hopefully Tanya too. She does eventually track her to a flat where Tanya is staying before trying to leave Russia, and we discover during a conversation between this American agent and Tanya that the Americans were watching Tanya long before Valya. And I was right about the part of the Americans being interested in the music smuggling operation that Tanya was involved in as well. So it was Tanya that led the Americans to Valya, not the other way about. So in a sense, she dragged him into this and she ruined his life, because the leverage that the Americans had over Valya was Tanya and her music smuggling ring. Irina does show up at the flat later on and Tanya outright attacks her, so the truth about her really affected her way more than I thought. But again, we don't really get any more information on this or Irina's connection to Brezhnev in this episode, and I think that's probably going to play out next week. But I've got some thoughts on how this is going to play out, so make sure you stick about to the end of the video. Later on, the chief designer actually accepts Valya's actions, and the Colonel thinks the only way that this is going to end is Valya sabotaging his precious Venus mission and wants him isolated on the ship. They come up with a plan to lock him in one of the modules, but they can't do it without the help of one of the crew. And the Colonel has a genius stroke here, and this really did blow my mind, but it's so simple when you think about it. They can't communicate the instructions to Sasha because he'll work out what's going on, so they decide to rope in Lakshmi's husband and use her native language so that Valya and Sasha won't immediately realise what's happening on board the ship. So they need his help in order to send this information to her. But what's interesting is the way that they present this to him as an opportunity to speak to his wife. They don't threaten him with violence, they don't threaten her or anything like that. In fact, they're all very, very nice about it. So again, it's levels on levels of manipulation that we're seeing from both these people here. Star City still needs to keep in regular contact with the ship while they're on the mission, so they can pass this off as a standard communication to set up the Colonel's plan. Sasha does realise something is wrong is when he points out, why would you let this guy talk to his wife when Sasha can't talk to Anastasia, and she's also a cosmonaut who was the first woman on the moon. So yeah, they pretty much realise straight away that everything is sort of being set up for them here, or something's not right. But what's really great is, while he's talking to Lakshmi, the chief designer gives the husband the instructions and just passes it off like a general message, like, hey, can you just tell her this? I'm a little bit too busy at the moment to pass this off.
I'm sorry, I hate to interrupt, but something's come up. Please, I need to keep my eye on the panel while she... Yes?
Again, they don't threaten him or try and put any sort of pressure on him, which was a bit of a masterstroke if you ask me. But as soon as he's passed the message on, they basically whisk him off, and the Colonel tells our people that he's to be kept under house arrest. So yeah pal, thanks for playing. But their plan to isolate Valya on board the ship is nearly complete. They manage to isolate him away from the other two in one of the modules, but of course Sasha quickly realises that something's wrong. While this is going on, the Colonel comes over the comms telling him that he's not going to be let out till he answers her questions, and telling the other two that Valya's a spy. And while Sasha works to free his friend, the Colonel plays off the fact that Valya's actions led to the death of Sasha's teammate on the lunar mission, when in fact that's not really true. But Sasha does manage to disable the comms between the ship and Earth in order to give them some privacy and try and work out exactly what to do next. Lakshmi pretty much accepts that Valya is a spy, but Sasha isn't so sure and tries to get him to confirm the truth. With the comms cut off, the Colonel gets desperate and wants to depressurise the entire module, basically killing Valya, and starts to threaten the chief designer staff when they don't want to follow through. The crew need to work to get him out before he runs out of air and is trapped in a vacuum, and Sergei sends instructions on how to open the hatch and save Valya. The Colonel realises what's happening and orders the chief designer to be arrested, and as he's being led off, effectively that leaves her in charge of mission control and his little super secret project. She also threatens to depressurise the whole ship if they do manage to free Valya, and they actually do get him out of there, and she orders Sergei to depressurise the entire ship. But of course he refuses, and of course he can't really be killed because we know he has to survive for the For All Mankind story to play out. She does pull a gun and gets another member of the team to do it. While on board, they realise what's happening and try and cut the communications before the entire ship is basically a vacuum. But their efforts to cut the signal cause a fire that engulfs them all, and that's pretty much where the episode ends. While we don't see them die, it's a safe bet that even one or two of them, if they survive, the mission isn't going to be complete. And again, this is all tying into what's going to happen in For All Mankind Season 6, I at least suspect. We had the same building tension this week that we've had in the last few episodes, and it was only a matter of time before Valya's actions came out and caught up with him, to everyone on Earth and everyone on board the Venus mission as well. But I didn't really see it happening this soon on the ship, or that ending happening as well. Killing two Day 1 characters is a pretty ballsy move from the writer if that's what they're actually going to do. But it's more the fallout of this I'm interested in. Will the higher-ups back the chief designer or the colonel's actions? There's no real right answer here, as one went behind everyone's back and the other just killed 3 people on a mission that would have cemented the Soviets' pole position in the space race. I think the most likely outcome will be that the chief designer is going to get his wrists slapped and is going to get forced to fall in line with what the higher-ups want and get to work properly on the moon base. But what happens to the colonel? Well, not demoted. We know that this new guy basically wants a job, so I guess that's going to come more into play throughout the rest of the season. But it's the Irina and the Tanya storyline I think that's going to get very interesting in the remaining few episodes we have of Season 1. I don't think anyone's seen that twist coming, that Tanya was the one that basically ruined Valya's life by getting him recruited to the Americans. But with the Irina stuff, I think we're going to get some heavy explanations next week. But what's interesting here, when you sit and think about it, is Tanya has a huge bargaining chip with the Americans and she just doesn't realise it yet. And that bargaining chip is Irina. She can basically offer to hand over someone close to the Soviet leader to the Americans, and I can see her actually thinking and coming up with a plan to do this. Because this would give her a better position in order to get a better deal, unless Irina has got some pretty good explanations for all this, but as always, we're going to have to wait and see. And as standard, I want to know what you guys thought about this episode, maybe the darkest one that we've had yet with that ending. But the show keeps asking the same questions of its characters, which is how far are you willing to go? We still have a few episodes left, and the ending of this episode and the fallout of it is surely going to define the later part of the seasons. But I want to know what you guys think is going to happen next with the chief designer and the colonel, and do you think that I could be right and Tanya is going to offer Irina up to the Americans at some point? Let me know what you think on here, or you can reach out to me on Twitter at The Geeks Reviews. As always, if you've made it this far and you haven't done it already, subscribe to the channel, leave a like on the video, and my name's Al. Thanks for watching.